Every day in America, families trust their favorite bread brands with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, unaware that ingredients in Wonder, Sara Lee, and others are quietly banned across Europe for links to cancer and toxic side effects. These chemicals, allowed by FDA policy and found on shelves at Walmart, Target, and Kroger, carry risks that sparked European bans decades ago, yet remain hidden in plain sight on U.S. tables. Why do the very same companies sell cleaner, safer bread abroad, but feed Americans additives that experts have warned about for years? The answer reveals a transatlantic food divide with real health consequences, and it begins with the story you were never told. Potassium bromate, azodicarbonamide, datem, calcium propionate, and TBHQ are names that rarely leave the ingredient label, but their effects reach far beyond the bakery. Dr. Leah Miller, a toxicologist specializing in foodborne chemicals, describes potassium bromate as a powerful oxidizer added to flour to strengthen dough and improve rise. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies it as possibly carcinogenic to humans. Group 2B, after animal studies found kidney and thyroid tumors in rats exposed to the compound. Potassium bromate is banned in the European Union, Canada, Brazil, China, and India, but remains permitted in the United States if residues in finished bread are low. Yet monitoring in several countries has revealed that not all bromate disappears during baking, leaving behind measurable traces. Azodicarbonamide, often called ADA, works as a flour bleaching agent and dough conditioner. It is infamous for its industrial uses in making foamed plastics, but in bread it helps create a light, airy crumb. When heated during baking, ADA breaks down into compounds like semicarbazide and urethane, both shown to cause tumors in rodents at high doses. The European Union banned ADA in food in 2005, citing these breakdown products and the principle that avoidable carcinogen exposure should be eliminated wherever possible. Datem, or diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides, is an emulsifier that helps bread stay soft and uniform. While regulators in both the United States and European Union allow datem, some animal studies have linked high intake to changes in heart muscle tissue. No major agency lists datem as a carcinogen, but questions remain about long-term exposure, especially in diets heavy on processed foods. Calcium propionate is a preservative that keeps mold at bay, extending shelf life for weeks. It is permitted on both sides of the Atlantic, but with tighter limits in Europe. A handful of small studies have reported irritability, restlessness, and sleep problems in children consuming bread with propionate, though these effects are not universally accepted as proven. Regulators have not labeled calcium propionate as a cancer risk, but concerns about possible metabolic and behavioral effects linger. TBHQ, or T-butylhydroquinone, is a synthetic antioxidant used to stabilize fats in bread and snacks. At high doses in animal studies, TBHQ has caused tumors, liver enlargement, and DNA damage. The European Food Safety Authority and the United States Food and Drug Administration both set strict intake limits, but the European Union restricts its use more tightly, and some countries have discouraged it altogether. 5 grams can be lethal in humans, though food exposures are much smaller. Each of these additives was introduced for technical reasons: stronger dough, longer shelf life, softer crumb. Yet their safety profiles are shaped by animal studies, regulatory decisions, and evolving science. Their continued use in American bread, while banned or restricted in Europe, reflects not just different risk assessments, but also different philosophies about what belongs in daily food. The path from lab to lunchbox in the United States is paved by a policy called Generally Recognized as Safe, or GRAS. Under this system, companies can introduce new food chemicals without independent government testing. Instead, they assemble their own safety dossiers, sometimes reviewed by expert panels with financial ties to the industry. The FDA rarely demands new studies or public disclosure before these additives reach supermarket shelves. Potassium bromate and azodicarbonamide were both approved in the 1960s, long before modern cancer testing. Decades later, animal studies raised new red flags, but the FDA's response was cautious. In 1991, after reviewing evidence of tumors in lab rats, the agency asked bakers to voluntarily stop using potassium bromate. No ban followed. The additive remains legal so long as residue is low, but enforcement is left to companies and local inspectors. By contrast, European regulators take a different approach. The EU operates with a positive list. Only additives proven safe through independent studies are allowed. If doubts arise, such as animal data suggesting cancer risk, the precautionary principle kicks in. Additives like potassium bromate and azodicarbonamide are removed from the list and banned until proven safe. This is not just a technicality. In the United States, a company can declare a new chemical safe and start using it in bread without even telling the FDA. In Europe, approval is centralized, public, and regularly reviewed. Mark Vargas, a former FDA policy analyst, points to the incentives at play. Reformulating bread to match European standards costs money. For major brands, longer shelf life and cheaper production mean higher profits. Vargas notes that food industry trade groups, including the American Bakers Association and the Consumer Brands Association, spend millions each year lobbying Congress and the FDA. Lobbying disclosures show more than $30 million a year from food and beverage interests targeting food safety, labeling, and additive regulation. These efforts shape the rules, keeping GRAS voluntary and blocking efforts to require independent review or mandatory reporting. The result? American bread aisles are lined with products containing chemicals banned in much of the world. The science is debated, but the economic incentives are clear. Without legal pressure, companies have little reason to change what's in the loaf. Wonder Bread and Nature's Own Butter Bread sit on supermarket shelves across America, promising everything from nostalgia to wholesome goodness. Their ingredient panels, though, tell a different story. Wonder Bread's label lists enriched wheat flour, high-fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, datem, and mono and diglycerides. Each additive serves a technical role. Calcium propionate keeps mold away for weeks. Datem and mono and diglycerides create a soft, uniform texture. But these conveniences come with a cost. Calcium propionate has been linked in small studies to behavioral changes in children, while datem, tested at high levels in animals, has shown effects on heart muscle tissue. Mono and diglycerides, often derived from partially hydrogenated oils, can introduce small amounts of hidden trans fats. Yet under FDA rules, any amount below 0.5 grams per serving can be labeled as zero. Nature's Own Butter Bread, marketed as free from artificial preservatives, also relies on calcium propionate and datem. Its label sometimes features the phrase, "no artificial preservatives," yet the definition quietly excludes chemical mold inhibitors like calcium propionate. The bread's texture and shelf life owe as much to these additives as to traditional baking. Soybean oil provides fat, but it's a highly processed oil rich in omega-6 fatty acids, which some studies associate with chronic inflammation when consumed in excess. The breads and butter name is more branding than recipe. Actual butter appears far down the list, if at all. Ellen Davis, a food safety advocate, points out that while United States labels list these additives openly, the same brands, when sold in Europe, must reformulate. European Union regulations ban potassium bromate and azodicarbonamide outright. Instead, European loaves use ascorbic acid, enzymes, or longer fermentation for dough conditioning, and preservatives are sharply limited or omitted. The result is a bread with a shorter shelf life, often just a few days, but without the same chemical load. In the United States, the drive for weeks-long freshness and uniformity keeps these additives in circulation, even as their safety remains under review. The contrast between labels is clear. American bread leans on an arsenal of chemical aids, while European counterparts are forced by law to rely on simpler, time-tested methods. Sara Lee Artisano and Pepperidge Farm white bread both command higher prices and promote an image of quality, but their ingredient lists tell a different story. Sara Lee Artisano, labeled as bakery bread, contains not just flour, water, and yeast, but also calcium propionate, datem, mono and diglycerides, soybean oil, and, in some versions, TBHQ. TBHQ is a synthetic antioxidant derived from petroleum, permitted in the U.S. to stabilize vegetable oils. While food exposures are low, animal studies have linked TBHQ to DNA damage, stomach tumors, and liver enlargement at higher doses. In Japan, TBHQ is banned from food, and across the European Union its use is tightly limited, especially in bread. Yet in the American market, TBHQ helps Sara Lee bread stay soft and fresh for weeks, supporting supply chains that stretch from factory to superstore shelves. Pepperidge Farm white bread, owned by Campbell Soup Company, is often positioned as a premium product, with packaging and pricing to match. Yet the ingredient list mirrors those of mass-market competitors: enriched wheat flour, high-fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, datem, and mono and diglycerides. High-fructose corn syrup, while not banned in Europe, is used more sparingly there due to agricultural policies and consumer preferences. In the U.S., it is a cheap sweetener that adds to the bread's shelf life and palatability, but research links high intake to insulin resistance, obesity, and fatty liver disease. Soybean oil, another staple fat in American bread, is processed from genetically modified crops and is high in omega-6 fatty acids, which some studies associate with chronic inflammation when consumed in excess. Despite their higher price tags, these breads rely on the same shelf life extenders and emulsifiers as the cheapest store brands. In Europe, Pepperidge Farm's parent company offers breads made with butter or olive oil, natural fermentation, and no synthetic preservatives. Products with a shelf life of days, not weeks. The American versions instead deliver long-lasting softness and sweetness, but at the cost of exposure to additives that European regulators have restricted or discouraged. The illusion of safety through price or branding dissolves under scrutiny of the ingredient panel, revealing a common reliance on chemical aids to meet the demands of mass distribution and extended shelf life. Great value white bread sits at the lowest rung of the supermarket bread aisle, priced at just $1 or $2 per loaf. For millions of American families, especially those using SNAP benefits, this is the bread that fits the weekly budget. But the cost savings come with a hidden price. Ingredient panels for budget loaves like Great Value reveal a familiar pattern: dough conditioners, emulsifiers, and preservatives that stretch shelf life and streamline mass production. Potassium bromate, a flour improver banned in the European Union, Canada, China, and Brazil, has been found in US budget breads, even after the FDA's 1991 request for voluntary removal. California's Prop 65 lists potassium bromate as a carcinogen, requiring a warning label if levels exceed the state's threshold. Yet, federal law still allows its use if bakers claim residues are low. Azodicarbonamide, another additive banned in Europe and Australia, has also appeared in the ingredient lists of discount breads. These chemicals are chosen not for nutrition or flavor, but for their power to keep bread soft and marketable for weeks on end. For retailers like Walmart, Long shelf life means fewer expired loaves and less waste, a crucial advantage when margins are razor thin. This cheapest option comes at a hidden health cost. The economic logic is inescapable. Cheaper bread relies on older, riskier chemistry to survive the journey from factory to checkout. While advocates and researchers have called for comprehensive residue testing, enforcement is patchy and ingredient lists can vary by region and supplier. The families most likely to depend on great value and similar store brands are also those least able to afford organic or specialty alternatives. Bread that meets the strictest European standards is out of reach for many on tight budgets. The result is a system where the most vulnerable shoppers are most exposed to additives that wealthier consumers and entire countries have chosen to avoid. The pattern is clear. The lower the price, the greater the reliance on shelf-life chemicals banned elsewhere. This is not just a technical debate about flour and preservatives. It's a question of who gets safer food and who is left with the cheapest, longest-lasting loaf, no matter the long-term risk. A child who eats 2 slices of commercial white bread every day will consume nearly 18,000 slices before their 18th birthday. That is about 700 loaves, each one carrying a mix of additives banned or restricted in much of the world. Dr. Leah Miller traces the math. With U.S. bread consumption averaging 53 pounds per person per year, the steady intake of potassium bromate, azodicarbonamide, DATEM, and calcium propionate adds up over time. Toxicologists use a cancer slope factor to estimate lifetime risk from substances like potassium bromate. Countries where bread is heavily contaminated, studies have predicted hundreds of thousands of excess cancer cases per million people at the highest exposures. While U.S. breads generally contain lower levels, the exposure is not zero, and the cumulative effect of daily consumption, especially in children, remains comprehensive unmeasured. No comprehensive study has tracked what happens when these chemicals are combined in a typical American diet. Every sandwich, every slice of toast, carries a small, repeated dose, one that regulators in Europe decided was not worth the risk. Ezekiel 4:9 sprouted grain bread offers a different approach to the bread aisle. Instead of refined flour and chemical preservatives, it's made from organic sprouted wheat, barley, millet, lentils, soybeans, and spelt, blended with water, yeast, and sea salt. The ingredient list fits on a single line, and there's no potassium bromide, azodicarbonamide, or synthetic preservatives. Because it skips shelf life extenders, Ezekiel bread is sold frozen or refrigerated, lasting about 5 days in the fridge and several months in the freezer. Prices range from $4 to $6 per loaf, and it's stocked at major chains like Walmart, Target, and Whole Foods. Safer. Dave's Killer Bread is another option found nationwide. It's certified USDA organic, so synthetic dough conditioners and preservatives are off the table. The recipe centers on organic whole wheat, water, seeds, cane sugar, and cultured wheat, which acts as a natural preservative. Without chemical additives, the shelf life is about a week, and a loaf typically costs $5 to $7. Local bakery bread keeps things even simpler. Flour, water, yeast, and salt. No chemicals, no preservatives. These loaves are usually baked daily and sold fresh, lasting 2 or 3 days at home. Prices vary, but most bakery loaves fall between $4 and $8. For families who want to avoid additives altogether, these 3 options prove that safer bread is within reach. A loaf of bread can hide a lot behind a long list of ingredients. Ellen Davis, standing in front of a supermarket shelf, lays out a simple plan for safer shopping. The first step is to scan the ingredient list for red flag chemicals. Potassium bromate, azodicarbonamide, DATEM, calcium propionate, TBHQ, mono and diglycerides, and high fructose corn syrup are all warning signs. If any of these appear, put the loaf back. Next, count the ingredients. Basic bread, which includes flour, water, yeast, and salt, should have fewer than 10 items. A list that runs for 15 or 20 items is a sign of heavy processing, not quality. Watch for enriched flour as the first ingredient. This means nutrients were stripped out, then added back in synthetic form. For families who want a quick shortcut, look for the USDA organic seal. Organic bread cannot contain synthetic dough conditioners or most industrial preservatives. Lastly, check the sugar. More than 2 grams per slice is a red flag. Ellen's advice is direct. Read every label, choose the simplest bread you can find, and do not trust health claims on the front of the package. Every shopping trip is a chance to vote for safer food. The change starts at the checkout line. Today, the same companies offer safer bread abroad, while U.S. shelves remain stocked with ingredients European regulators reject as cancer risks. As U.S. cancer and chronic disease rates outpace much of Europe, the real question is why American standards lag so far behind. Our daily bread reflects decisions made for profit, not protection. Change won't come from industry or regulators. It starts with what we choose to demand. What will you accept on your table?